Morning, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to all of you here this morning. Let me begin by thanking everyone for taking the time to join us in exploring and reflecting on the wider realities of women and girls' experiences of obstetric fistula. Obstetric fistula is a neglected public health and a neglected human rights issue. The experience of fistula through obstructed labour for women and girls is traumatising. It is the physical injury that results in persistent incontinence, along with other medical complications. It is also linked to one of the major causes of maternal mortality. It can lead to the delivery of stillborn babies and in some cases result in infertility. In countries where motherhood is key to a woman's social relevance in her community, this is devastating. There are, of course, longer lasting and perhaps more damaging lived experiences of injustice, trauma, and the denial of basic human rights. We have 5 great speakers this morning on our panel who have years of direct experience in supporting women and girls with fistula, and others who have committed their time to ensuring that the voices of women and girls are heard in forums where action can be taken. When I lived in Nigeria and Uganda, I came across the groundbreaking work of the late Sister Doctors Maura Lynch and Anne Ward, both medical missionaries of Mary, who dedicated their lives in enabling women and girls who experience obstetric fistula to live a dignified life. And today we are privileged to have Sister Dr. Miriam Duggan from the Franciscan Missionaries for Africa, who will reflect with us on her own work with fistula patients in Uganda. You will also hear from Dr. Shersha Syed, a medical professional who will talk about the experiences of obstetric fistula among women and girls in Pakistan.
Good morning, I just missed a call.
Zooming in from Soroti in eastern Uganda, we have Alice Seriange, who will talk to us about her commitment to supporting the lives of women in rural Uganda who experience obstetric fistula. Alice will demonstrate the importance of a holistic approach to interventions in supporting and empowering fistula survivors. Sister Miriam Baker and Father Edward Flynn will demonstrate that obstetric fistula is preventable. They show that in order to effectively respond to eradicating obstetric fistula and its wider repercussions, a human rights-based approach is critical. So let's begin with a short video where Anna, an obstetric fistula survivor, shares with us her experience of living with fistula.
Nananti tibitali nundu tibitali le eva kube ye kuma kwa we kilomita 5 na dinu la kirale ja manyano humo ta nenga la wana na so kamusi ila no kia musi ne nambu isa kwa nanguko panengoi na ngombe ukwa nambi ya kota oni dina ni te no utu na dini ite to karibu tibitali 5 o utu dina no lakini ndia to teka tibitali na tete kia na ndia kweta arambi kutambui naambie kwita arambe kanisa yo kayanzange ya na toka neta nyanya mabulanira na kanisa mo kama ndangi ya nenda kanisa ni neka kuthino ndo kutande kwakwa na bita ni mumo na ne muke mugugu na koma kitandani kwakwa na koma ndi na mute wakwa athi te buka baba wakwa ni kwenda ni twebe ni mutumia tiki mwana no mutumia buka tikati ukwenda na mimea nakwa no kwe ila na red ya rambi na yitiwe kubikana atakeza kyakwa na twa neke mwene neke itatu prima buna wana wakwa ani na thukuma kwima myundani na ila na wa yuende anje kwima wanambite ne dibende no na teta ro bakando na teta ni nejie kota nundu wa ngutu na wendi wangu na muno wende ani ngumya mukimuguku ona na kwa market ndi mutumia wakwa andia nundu wa no tu wako kokoma ndine na tai mwingi muno iwana ndiwa tibitali ya jamaa Sister Monua Navy on Bada Bebe Vitali Ivala Yadamana Mukula you Nikubika Najao Nanina Mimi Jadino Beta Jiva the Lindy on a bell Gonita on a Ruyala Mandera Danima no Yanon who do Nikubika Najao and be who and one Picabu or the Kui Dramana. No one I told you with the Nadine or Arambe Canita and Dangia now para tiki wako bikago na bikago nye bet lingi onewe ne ata ona ndulu nye na tina yitu mana na butu mana na mpaka neno kamuti nipo gumuko na ta ibeti pala ni koma nyomba ya nyiki ona ye badi na nipo gumuko na ta idi aka nondo pe no na itu bida mbe itu utu wako biwa no wa ke me ke nondo ila ukunya momo na ngodi wa ko oli wa para no me ko mo utu wa ko re kanza kana ka le ko ja nie na to me abambazi na bambazi na nyambe da ni ja na no ta na nei na wala ma yo wa na tu su ku matene ni mo na yo ba na yu na yo ba ila ne ndi ni na ji tu na bo ona ka mu ni na bo yi na ni ne no kie mo di ndi Peke no nina ke no me da ma kwa ni mo na ngombe ko kama kunyeki na mbui kunyeki na pe mo yo ne mo yini ronyo kama kanyeki ona mutumia wakwa ekala oko no kite na mukule ni ja ombe na bindi tangara maila watu mia uyitwa ninga mambinge re kyo cha kwa ni bingi re kite na mali umwa ino ndo mali yetu aninga hii ende ni wangu mukula ta serikali ya kaunti mundu no kuituba akutika pe matani yako cha mana patembeza lakini nundu uto tu mu manyaka no tu no na no wo re nyaka ona mundu athamba atheata ndeta kuthia nundu wa utu ni wata mukulia mutheje matakitali ku me no tu kana mutu aki hospitali bakubi wende ni mundu wa uto tu ni wali bakubi nundu mundu na wa no kwenda ndina mbeta ta kuthi kwata kenge no wangu mukula ta ni kana wende Nakitali tu choka wende ni maru te mea bala no ndo no wai no kendia we bala te ne o ka ti vitali na kiao na wa we no ro tu wende la mo di mabetela ko beta wende a wo kubya ni mo tu ona we kala na muta o bala wa di ku baka ona kwa mo nya no da me madamba atatu ona nyombe tu ili ka ni muke Beirula we no wa mo de po tu da gara ko bi tambiru na yubule telekali atina kitale tirute de jo tu no wo mi jo no ibeti twana rutiti andu mako inyonde ni mo itu wa o tu ati de tina kitale tu ge kitu yi dei ni mo be ya.
And a story demonstrates the multiple and complex issues at play in living with and responding to obstetric fistula. She highlights the intersecting denial in accessing her fundamental human rights. So on to our presenters. Our first presenter is Dr. Shersha Syed, who will explore these dimensions further. Dr. Shersha is an obstetrician gynecologist and a leading campaigner and visionary for women's rights, girls' education, and safe motherhood in Pakistan. He is one of the founders and director of the Kuhi Goth Women's Hospital, Landi in Karachi in Pakistan, which provides quality emergency obstetric care to poor rural women. It also houses an adult women's literacy center. Dr. Shersha has translated and produced books on midwifery in Urdu and Sindhi and has established the first unit in Pakistan to train nurse midwifery tutors. In 1991, he founded the NGO Pakistan National Forum on Women's Health. He is a graduate of Dow Medical College, Karachi in Pakistan, and he completed his fellowship of obstetrics and gynecology here in Ireland and trained at the Addis Ababa Fistula Hospital in Ethiopia. In 2009, his work was recognized by the Clinton Global Initiative Award. Dr. Shersha, the Zoom space is now yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. First of all, thank you all of you who are attending this meeting, and especially people in Dublin and the place where I trained in St. James's Hospital and room around the South Circle Road. I have very good memories working in different hospitals, and I learned a lot. I started working from the Francis Hospital in Sportinkula Hospital in Ballinasloe, and I had great relationship with my Franciscan friends and nuns That's great. So when I left Ireland and came back to Pakistan, I have no idea about fistula and maternal death, because 9 years in Ireland, I haven't seen a single maternal death. And of course, only one fistula, which was caused by the radiotherapy in St. James's Hospital, and which is a known complication. But the obstetrical fistula and the maternal death was a news for me in Pakistan, because during my undergraduate education, the books we read, those books were the books of obstetrics and gynecology in advanced countries, not in Pakistan. So we know what's happening in America and Europe, but we didn't know what's happening in Pakistan. So when I came back and I saw this patient with fistula, and I was just amazed that how this woman is end up in maternity hospital and nobody is able to help her. Only one surgeon used to do off and on fistula, and she will have this patient. And in majority of the cases, it is not successful. So I wrote Royal College of Obs and Gynae, and they were very kind, and they organized my visit to Ethiopia, where I learned fistula repair from Catherine Hamlin, Mamito, and two very important girls in as a fistula patient, Aisha. They taught me how to repair fistula. So from that time, I always thought fistula is a woman right violation. It's a human right violation. Any woman, especially young girls, age 13, 14, 15, 16, they develop fistula because of a physiological condition, which is a pregnancy. And because of this pregnancy, if they develop fistula and end up having urine all the time in their clothes, in their bed, in their room, and their husband, their in-laws, they leave them, what kind of human right is this? This is a gross human right violation, and we should treat them not only with sympathy, but also empathy. So in Pakistan, fistula is a disease of extremely poor women living in city slums and far-flung rural areas, from Kashmir to Chitral, and from Chitral to Baltistan, Gilgit, and from there to Loralai in Balochistan, then in Punjab, all these rural areas, they have patients with this complication of fistula. So initially, when we started working with these fistula patients, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Shesha. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, because there was some red line, so I thought maybe you are not hearing me.
No, you're
So
all good.
we started, but yeah, immediately when I was working in a government maternity home, I realized that government has no solution for the fistula, because they even don't recognize that this condition is existing there. The reason was very simple, because this is a disease of poor women, poor girls, and nobody in the government, either politician or bureaucrats, their family never suffer from fistula. I remember one case from Balochistan. They traveled to Karachi after traveling for 36 hours on a camel, then on donkey cart, then reached to the main road. And first time in her life, she has seen a metal road. And when the first time in her life, she has seen a bulb and the light and telephone. So these kind of conditions where no emergency obstetrical is available, neither there is a normal obstetrical care is available. So these girls stay in labor for hours and hours, the baby die, and they deliver the baby and they develop this fistula. So this is, I strongly believe, this is not a medical condition. It's a condition which is a straight human right violation, a woman right violation. No girl or woman can suffer from this condition in any circumstances. So my conclusion was, from the very initial stage in Pakistan, my conclusion was that we need an army of midwives to prevent fistula, because it's the prevention which is more important than the cure. We can treat, we can operate on the backlog of thousands of patients with fistula, but at the same time, we should work that there shouldn't be more new fistula formation. That's the reason you mentioned in my introduction that we translated many books, because when we started teaching midwives, we immediately realized that there is no books available for the midwives as a resource material. And I remember I found out some handwritten notes by a, by a midwife in Multan, and that handwritten notes were the sort of textbook when these girls get this photocopies of that textbook and they read from there and they get exam or whatever it is. The training was very bad. Most of the girls, they just passed the exam with it without doing a single delivery. So we worked in two different areas. Number one, we created a lot of resource material. We translated the midwifery book, especially that Easy Midwifery of Hesperian Foundation, which is one of the best midwifery book in the world. And then we translated books regarding the infection control, labor room management, the duties of midwife, the how to treat patients in labor, and if there is a complication, how to involve doctors. And when you see patients with fistula, get admitted and treat them in consultation with the obstetrician gynecologist and sometimes urologist, etc., etc. So that was the starting point. And at the same time, the UNFPA started a campaign all over the world regarding the eradication of fistula. So they start helping us, and then we developed this hospital. Now we have this hospital in Koigot, Landhi, Karachi, and we have 9 centers all over Pakistan in different parts of the country, and we treat all fistula patients without any charges. All of the surgeons who are working with us, they are voluntary surgeons, and we do organize camps different time, and these patients come and we treat them. So this is the situation at the moment. We tried to convince government that all government hospitals should have a training program. Unfortunately, the doctors, the obstetricians are least bothered, and they have not lot of interest in fistula repair, because it's not a field which has glamour. So we have some young fistula surgeons, very few, but they are very good. They are working with us with their heart, with their mind and soul, and they wanted to help these girls. So we all call them, these are the doctors who have heart on the right side. So when you have a heart on the right side, you will work for this fistula patients. So at the moment, we are treating the complicated cases in Fistula Hospital in Karachi, where I have the support of very good urologists like Aziz Abdullah, Narenjan Kumar, Prakash, and Maria, and Nusrat Faruqi. So these are the urologists who are doing all this reimplantation of the ureter in very complicated cases of fistula. And journal, about 80-85%. This group of surgeons are helping, and every 6 months we organize a complicated fistula repair camp. From next week, we are having this camp in Karachi, and we are going to operate about 18 patients referred from different parts of the country, and some new surgeons will join us. They will see, then they will assist, and they will repair some cases, and that's the way system works. Now, this is the one part of the whole story. The second part, that in our hospital, we do more than 600 deliveries per month. And we have a very strong, very active School of Midwifery. And we are training midwives to provide preventive obstetrical care, not to have VVF or RVF. And the second thing we do that every 3 months, we invite midwives all over the country for the refreshing courses to train them again how to deal as a midwives, and they are providing very good services. So in the meantime, the last point, in the meantime, we were able to do a case in the High Court of Pakistan regarding this, the government's responsibility. And our lawyer, Sarah, she did a very good case, and from the High Court, the government was ordered to take the responsibility of the patients who suffer from fistula because the government failed to provide emergency obstetrical care. So that was one thing which we always mention, and government is trying to help us to find those candidates, obstetricians who are interested in fistula, and they are eager to send them to us in our hospital to train them, which we are doing. So this is the basic information about the genital tract fistula in Pakistan, and I will be very happy to answer questions related to Pakistan and its condition here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dr. Shersha. And what stood out for me is what you said about fistula being a disease of poor women, not just in rural areas, but also in urban areas.
Slums.
And in the slum areas, yes, and the kind of the difficulties that you're facing in kind of getting widening support for your work, and also that you know, that this impacts young girls as young as 13 years of age, and that, you know, it's kind of a manifestation of their invisibility within society. So it's a human rights issue, it's a gender issue. So thank you for that. In our next speaker is Sister Miriam Baker. Miriam is a member of the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd. She lives and works in Geneva. She is the main representative for her congregation at the UN Human Rights Council and related offices. Before going to Geneva, Miriam worked in Germany and Albania with survivors of human trafficking. At the UN in Geneva, she advocates for the rights of women with a focus on eradicating human trafficking. She also works specifically on the prevention of obstetric fistula and works together with Father Edward Flynn, who you'll meet later, to advocate for the eradication of this preventable condition. Sister Miriam, you are very welcome.
Thank you. I will share my screen for a presentation. So can you see the presentation?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Obstetric fistula is a human rights issue that does not receive enough awareness. There's little research with accurate figures on the number of women living with fistula. Women who live in remote areas may not be counted, and the prevalence of fistula is hard to estimate. Some estimates report that there may be as many as 2 to 3 million women living with this condition. Dr. Hamid Rajwan of the International Federation of Gynecologists and Obstetricians calls them guesstimates. Obstetric fistulas destroy the lives of many young women in the developing world. While obstetric fistulas have vanished from the industrialized world, they continue to occur in epidemic numbers in developing countries. In regions where healthcare, and particularly maternal healthcare, is poor or absent, the number of obstetric fistulas is likely to be high. Although the treatment of women with obstetric fistula is a worthy endeavor, the ultimate goal should be to eliminate fistulas entirely by providing adequate maternal health services and perinatal care. The main factors for the creation of obstetric fistulas are primarily economic, social, and cultural. When women are married too young with an immature pelvis, they can have problems arising during labor. There are places then when a woman has her first pregnancy, she is forced to give birth at home. Home deliveries without help from a skilled healthcare worker occur often very far from healthcare facilities, and by the time she is referred to one of them, the baby is trapped in the pelvis, which causes the obstetric fistula. Another factor is no less important, is scarring from female genital mutilation, which can obstruct the passage of the baby through the genital tract. There are gender issues because a woman does not have decision-making power. She relies on others for the decision to seek medical help and for the decision to go to the healthcare facility to deliver her baby. Connected with the gender issue are three delays. First, the delay for the decision to seek medical help when the woman is in labor. Second, the delay to get to the healthcare facility. And third, the delay of provision of adequate care, aggravated by the delay or impossibility of payment for a repair operation. Healthcare workers, midwives, and traditional birth attendees need a special training to be able to recognize early enough the risk of a woman developing an obstetric fistula during labor. They need to know about the three delays, the gender issue, and be able not only to refer the woman to a medical facility which can prevent the condition, but also ensure that the woman goes there in timely manner and is able to pay for the service. It would be even better if this service were free. Related to this fact that the road infrastructure and transport services in rural areas are often not sufficiently developed to facilitate easy access to hospital and other medical facilities. Often, women cannot afford the cost of transport or distances to the necessary facilities, and they are very long or need time to be organized. These often result in women not reaching the healthcare facility in time or prevent them from considering making the journey in the first instance. This shows that obstetric fistula is not only a health issue, but is linked with poverty and is linked with where a woman lives, her educational level, her status as a woman in society, her freedom of choice to visit a doctor, and the possibility of accessing prenatal health care, access to money to pay for the medical treatment, and access to information. Obstetric fistula can be eradicated by improving these social, cultural, and economic factors. Traditional birth attendants play a crucial role because of their social standing in the community. Often, male village elders have decision power. They are listened to for the traditional topics. Perhaps the village chief was even brought into the world by a traditional birth attendant. The training that traditional birth attendants need to contribute to the reduction of obstetric fistula is to be able to recognize the emergency signs before and during the delivery. They must recognize certain signs of danger, such as arrest of labor progression, signs of uterine rupture, or a pelvic disproportion. They must recognize those red flags. Training could be focused on prevention, meaning telling every pregnant woman that she should have her pregnancy followed at least 3 times by a skilled medical assistant so that measures can be taken to provide a cesarean section to those women who need one and also the necessary medical follow-up. Repair surgery is necessary when preventive measures have not been taken. We need to act to solve the problems contributing to the formation of obstetric fistulas. We recommend the following for the prevention of fistulas. Ensure that women have adequate nutrition to support them, in particular during their childbearing years. Improve access to reproductive health services and information, including family planning. Ensure that pregnant women have access to maternal health services and information and learn to seek care when experiencing complications. Provide competent care during delivery. Advocate for emergency obstetric care facilities and skills. Promote women's empowerment, including girls' education. There must be prenatal care programs. Ensure the accessibility to cesarean section. Awareness campaigns on obstetric fistula. Awareness campaigns on the gender issues as a fight against female genital mutilation and for women's rights, for women's freedom of speech and right to education. Education to use prevention service and know about women's reproductive rights as family planning, prenatal and postnatal care for an early detection of problems linked to pregnancy to prevent complications such as obstetric fistula. In wider rural areas, there needs to be a multiplication of healthcare facilities which will reduce the distance between the healthcare facility and their beneficiaries. Can you imagine the intense suffering and shame of being a social outcast? The unending misery of feeling helpless for even a few moments. Free for just some moments. The foul odor that causes others to avoid you. The humiliation, deprivation, and despair is fierce and unending. The women need prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation. We need to see obstetric fistula as an issue that needs a holistic approach. It is not only a medical issue. The healthcare system should be able to completely prevent obstetric fistula. This will be possible if we work on the poverty, the inequalities, the bad infrastructure in rural areas, the gender issues, the stigmatization, being an outcast, and the silence which causes women to suffer this condition in silence. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sister Miriam, for your insightful and comprehensive presentation that further contributes to the invisibility of women who experience obstetric fistula, even the fact that we don't know the numbers, we don't have the necessary data, and also kind of highlighting the wider neglected human rights dimensions of women's experiences of kind of that lead up to obstetric fistula, and the wider gender inequalities, and the social and economic realities that they experience. And I think critical to your messaging is that this can be prevented. It's a preventable disease, given more inclusive infrastructural and social systems that are put in place. And thanks for the steps as to how we can achieve that. So thank you. And our next presenter, Alice Serienge, will talk just about that now. In 1999, Alice founded the Association for the Rehabilitation and Reorientation of Women for Development, Terawode, which is headquartered in Soroti in Uganda. Key to Terawode's vision and accomplishments is its holistic approach in addressing obstetric fistula. That's raising awareness and engaging in advocacy around prevention, treating women and girls experiencing the condition, as well as empowering women and girls and supporting their reintegration into society. In 2019, Alice facilitated the opening of the first dedicated fistula hospital in Uganda, one of just 3 on the continent of Africa. Alice's academic background demonstrates a holistic approach and commitment to human development and human rights. She holds a master's degree in social work from George Warren Brown School in Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. She has an MBA for social entrepreneurs from the University of Cattolica in Italy. Alice also has a background in mass communication, journalism, media and democratization, women's studies, human rights, and peace studies. A huge welcome to you, Alice. It's lovely to see you. Thank you very much. The space is yours.
Hi, everyone. I feel humbled to be presenting and sharing the stories of the Ugandan women, especially the women and girls who are affected by obstetric fistula. I bring you greetings from the entire Terawode team in Uganda. All the wonderful work that you have had that has been accomplished by Terawode and Terawode Women's Community Hospital has been through an approach which is both partnerships and collaborations through the private public partnerships with the Ministry of Health and other stakeholders. So we provide holistic services to the women, holistic routine treatment of patients who are suffering from fistula. Routine care for patients of obstetric fistula now is possible after the commissioning of Terawode Women's Community Hospital 2 years ago. So we are now able to operate women as and when they walk into the facility. And our care also is holistic in nature, in such a way that it's not only the clinical care, the surgery repairs which the women receive. There is a dedicated team of counselors who provide psychosocial support and counseling services to the women on arrival and throughout their stay in the hospital. We have also a unit that provides physiotherapy to the women, as some of these patients end up with physiotherapy needs as part of or an addition to the treatment that they need to receive. We screen for gender-based violence. Why do we do so? Because we are aware, we know from experience that fistula is either a cause and or also a result, and sometimes both. It's a cause, a result, and sometimes the women experiences sexual gender-based violence before suffering fistula. It's a predisposing factor during the time they are living with fistula, and also after or post-repair period. So we pay special attention to screening these cases and building these experiences in our dedicated 14 residential reintegration training program for all the women, former fistula patients. They go through these trainings before we provide community linkages and other community-based follow-up and mentorship activities. So in addition to operating Terrewater Women's Community Hospital, which has a bed capacity of 600 patients annually, we also continue to support the Ministry of Health and its other partners to organize treatment camps in different regional referral hospitals.
Our next presenter is Sister Dr. Miriam Duggan, who is Zooming in from Kenya. Sister Miriam, are you here before I start talking about you? Can you say hello?
Yes.
Oh, good woman. Great, lovely.
Yes,
so you're on quicker than you thought you were going to be. Let me introduce you briefly. Sister Miriam is a native of Limerick City. She's a Franciscan sister, Franciscan missionary sister for Africa. She graduated from University College Cork and completed her internship at the Royal Hospital in Wolverhampton. Sister Miriam went to Uganda in East Africa in 1969, where she worked at the St. Francis Hospital in Nsambia in Kampala, which is a training hospital founded and run by the Franciscan Sisters. She was the head of Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology there, and later as the medical superintendent, as well as being involved in the training of midwives and doctors. In response to the HIV pandemic that Uganda was experiencing, Sister Miriam was involved in setting up clinics and home-based care programs to care for the increasing number of people who were becoming ill with HIV and AIDS. She founded the very popular Youth Alive program in an effort to address the root causes of the spread of HIV and to help young people to make responsible choices in preventing the spread of HIV. The program has now been extended to 21 countries across the continent of Africa. Currently, Sister Miriam is working with Hands of Care and Hope in Kariobangi in Kenya, where she's supporting children and out-of-school youth and women living with HIV. Sister Miriam has received many awards for her work, including the Presidential Distinguished Service Awards, and she's been honoured by Harvard University, the Church of Uganda, the Templeton Foundation, and the much sought after recognition for the President and Parliament of Uganda for her work in HIV prevention. Sister Miriam, thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and many thanks for the invitation to be part of this webinar. Having done my undergraduate training in Ireland and postgraduate training in England, I arrived in Uganda in 1969, head of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology. One of the big challenges I faced in the first few weeks was seeing patients in the clinic with obstetrical vaginal fistula. I had never been confronted with one before, never saw one operated upon. As I listened to their stories, their pain, their rejection, I felt real compassion for these women, many who were in their early 20s. That sense of leaking urine all day, feeling wet and smelly in a hot climate. Some had been rejected from their homes, others were ashamed to go out. That whole sense of shame and rejection was having a very big psychological impact on them. And they were often just totally isolated in the village. There was no one at the time I could refer these cases to. I searched in the library for references, which was very scanty. I couldn't find very much written about it. I felt I could not make their condition any worse if I tried to close the fistula. Maybe there was a chance it might work. The prayer I set about doing my first repair. My first case was successful and gave me courage to go on. Over the years, I gained experience, different degrees of fistulas. The fistulas whereby only the body wall of the bladder was involved, the most successful, the easiest to repair. When the urethral sphincter was involved, there was another challenge. Even though one repaired the fistula, the woman ended up with severe stress incontinence. Some improvement followed by doing a urethral sling operation, and the result often depending on the amount of scarring that there was in that area. One of the learnings over the years was that if one was able to divert the urine from the bladder and keep the repair area dry, especially in cases which were very scarred, the results were improved. This I did, and I don't know whether others would agree with this, conventional, was by putting small catheters into the ureters and diverting the urine away from the site of the repair. I would leave these catheters in for a few days until the repair was there, and it gave me better results when the urine was still going into the bladder. Another challenge faced was there was a complication of having rectovaginal fistula as well as a bladder fistula, leading to contamination in the area. Rectal fistula needed to be repaired first so that you could have some hope then repairing the bladder fistula. There were the cases where there was severe damage to the urethra, sphincter, and the bladder wall, and the bladder repair was impossible. In these cases, one had to look for an alternative. That was implanting the ureters into the large bowel. This could only be done when there was good anal sphincter tone. The Ugandan patient, sigmoid colon is large, suitable for implantation. This functioned very well. The risk of recurrent urinary tract infection, but this was reduced if the ureter was being implanted into the bowel, was projected slightly beyond the intestinal mucosa. But I remember having a case come once, and she was in that category. Her sphincter was destroyed, her urethra was destroyed, there was a large gap in the bladder. And she said no, she needed to go somewhere else where they could repair it. She flew to London. She came back some months later. What she had done was she had an implantation of her ureters, her sigmoid colon. So I felt a bit assured that even in London they could do what we couldn't do there, right? With time, Dr. Kelly from Birmingham came to work with Dr. Maura Lynch, unfortunately, who was passed on, the commissioning sister of Mary and Kitova Mataka. And Mr. Hancock, who was a specialist in rectal surgery, came to work in Camberley Hospital. So it was good to compare notes and learn from each other. Since then, I'm sure there has been great progress made in dealing with these cases. And I was very interested in the talk being given about the race homes. The repair surgery demands attention to detail. It is to be successful. Good post-surgery care. Advice in regard to future pregnancies should be given. Future pregnancy should be delivered by cesarean section, not by vaginal delivery. Even though they may be difficult and it involves a lot of time, the reward is great, because these women, once you close their leakage and stop it, are so grateful, and you've experienced a great joy yourself. From studying the cases that presented, the greatest majority occurred in cases of prolonged delivery at home with the assistance of a local helper. And that was most commonly in the rural areas, or as people have mentioned before, in the slums. Many had more android pelvises and had not attended for antenatal care and assessment. They went into labor at home and the delivery was prolonged and frequently became obstructed. There was a danger of developing a fistula due to prolonged pressure between the bony head of the baby and the pelvic bone. The bladder tissue became necrotic due to lack of blood supply. There's also the question of lack of available transport to get the person, once they were in obstructed labor, to the hospital. Delay in referring them. To me, the important thing is prevention. Preventing fistula is possible. Good antenatal care, the prior pelvic assessment, preferably all first deliveries should be conducted in hospital settings. Education of local midwives or birth attendants It is not a failure on their part if they have to refer the patient to hospital. The importance of doing so early. Well-staffed maternity hospitals are clinics where patients can be attended to quickly. The longer the pressure on the bladder, the greater the risk of developing fistula. Education of community health workers, educating the people about the dangers of prolonged labour, the importance of attending maternity services. In this day and age, women have a right to be provided with maternity care at all levels. This is a justice issue. No one should have to endure the consequences of living with a fistula or incontinence. If there is good maternity care, fistulas are not seen. Repairs often require a prolonged stay in hospital, sometimes several operations. These women should have access to free medical care. Poorer women cannot afford surgery and hospital stay. We also recommend that more gynecologists be trained in dealing with fistula. The training of midwives will be very really put a stress on looking out for the signs of obstruction. For me, prevention is the key. With good antenatal care, well-supervised deliveries, it is possible to eradicate obstetrical fistula. Thank you.
Sister Miriam, that was awesome. Thank you very much. I think, I mean, what's just like the one quote that you said, that in this day and age, we shouldn't be seeing cases of obstetric fistula, and that it is a justice issue. I think, you know, your presentation has outlined kind of the stark realities of the experience for young women who experience this, and the dire need for awareness as well as training for midwives and traditional birth attendants and doctors to notice, or to be aware of, or to be you know, to have it in their radar that this is, you know, that this is something to look out for, and to know what to do when it's presented with you. So thank you very much for that. I think we have Alice back. So Alice, I'm going to, well, this is take 2. Thank you, Alice.
Thank you so much for, thank you so much for giving me the second chance. So a lot about Terewode and Terewode Women's Community Hospital, the efforts we are making, how we are collaborating, building partnerships to make sure that this whole great work happens. I have 2 case studies to share with the meeting as part of my presentation. And I think I will just have like 1 or 2 questions to ask when I finish with my presentation. One of the ladies that we treated at Terewode Women's Community Hospital in 2020 was called Harriet. I will not mention her other name. So Harriet came in with a CVF, with an incontinent of urine, at the Women's Community Hospital. She tells us her story that she had been treated, she had delivered by a cesarean section, and she developed a fistula. Her baby died. Okay, and Harriet came to the hospital. That was now in September the following year. She came in December 2020. Harriet dropped out of school in primary 5. She was forced into a marriage at the age of 15 years. She conceived at the age of 17 years. Okay, the man who was responsible for her childbirth was in a polygamous marriage, and Harriet was wife number 3. Harriet got pregnant, and the first 2 wives, the other wives, called her names. They nicknamed her husband snatcher. Husband snatcher. At the age of 15 years, at the age of 16 years, and all you hear around you is you are a husband snatcher. So she gets pregnant and she delivers, goes to labor, ends up with a fistula. At the time when she was in hospital, in a district hospital, both her husband and her father come to visit her and take care of her. But on seeing that she was leaking continuously, the husband abandons her in hospital, and so was the father. The father also disappears and leaves this girl alone in a hospital. Her mother was helpless, but she couldn't even come to the hospital. And it took a priest in a nearby village, picked her from the hospital after she had stayed for almost 2 months in that health facility and in the neighboring area with friends. A priest took her, stayed with her for a short time, and then eventually had about treatment at Teriwada Women's Community Hospital and brought her to Teriwada Women's Community Hospital. Harriet stayed with us. She was treated. She was successful, incontinent, the hole was closed, and she was dry, meaning that she was successfully treated. During that time, it was the time also when our government announced the first lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Harriet was with us in the hospital. We were closing the hospital. Harriet did not have where to go. And so one of the board members took up Harriet. After the lockdown, she came to the hospital. Harriet continues to live with us. We tried to find a home for her to go back and learned that both her mother and father had passed on while we were in the lockdown. The priest is not able now to take back Harriet. Harriet doesn't want to go back. She says she needs a home. Everywhere I go, she says, "Director, I don't want to go back to our home. I need a home. I won't stay here if you don't find me a home." Maybe my question would be, if you were in my situation, what would you do? What kind of reintegration package would you give Harriet? Which one do you think she needs? As we still reflect about Harriet, there is also another one, Rosalind. And I chose these two young ladies, survivors of obstetric fistula, deliberately, but there are many others who share their stories. So Rosalind was also 15 when we received her at the hospital with a VVF, still incontinent of urine, and also she had a stillbirth. She was also in a marriage which failed. When she stayed with us, her treatment was successful. But even when she was inside the ward, as I routinely walk past to go and greet the patients in the ward, she runs after me and says, "Madam, I want to go back to school. Will you take me back to school?" The first time I ignored her. I said, no, first care about getting better, you'll get better. So I walk away. The second time she catches me up again and says, "I think I am now going to be better. Will you take me back to school?" If you were in that situation, what would you do? These are real life situations. I know each one of us would come up with different interventions, but probably there is just this one critical one, that if you touch that right button, it would probably help this young survivor go back home and begin her journey to normal life. Many times, literature tells us that our social repression program should aim at helping the survivor, the former fistula patient, to return to her normal life. It's a very complex issue, helping them to return today. Government policy is free, but someone has to pay for it. And who is that someone? It can't be Alice Emasu, perhaps. I dedicate my life, I dedicate my time. We in Terewode dedicate our time to interact with these ladies and support them. And who is going for this woman, for that young girl to come and receive care in the hospital, even if it is free, but they need transportation. They need to feed in the time they are in hospitalization. Unfortunately, in addition to obstetric fistula, many of them also suffer other comorbidities, other health conditions, including foot drops. Often others come up with cases of secondary infertility. All these and many others requires someone to have a source of personal income. So our integration program also gives the women skills, gives them knowledge based on their capacity within their localities, something to do, bring back a smile on their faces. It's quite challenging. If someone was asking, what are your experiences? I would say the experiences we have are many. Every woman's reintegration need is unique. Is unique. Others want to have a baby. But we all know that we would need special care if such a woman was being repaired of fistula, has to give birth again. So who is going to make sure that happens safely for her? It takes psychosocial support counseling. It takes collaborations. For us in Terewode, we have strong collaborations with the local governments, the different community leaders. Every one of us, I would say, including you today who is listening to me, I think you have something you can do to make this campaign to eliminate obstetric fistula globally successful. Each one of us has something to do. I would probably end by asking, who is accountable to Harriet and Rosalind? Who? Is it the state? Is it the husbands who disappear? I don't intend to paint the image of our dear husbands, our fathers, our men. I don't want to paint it negatively, or maybe to say Ugandan men don't care. Our experiences have shown that if these men are fully educated and supported, they support their ladies. But the thing is, many try initially to support these ladies in treatment. Many try. But when they fail, when things really they feel it, they are defeated, they take and hide away from them. And so they leave the ladies to carry the burden on their own. If anybody asks you ever, some people ask, what's the burden? What's the economic burden of fistula? What's the economic burden? I don't know. What do you think is the economic burden? What is the social? What's the health burden of having fistula in Uganda? From those success stories, I think that it summarizes the kind of work that Terewode is doing. And I take this opportunity to thank our partners who have been there with us. In my PowerPoint slide, I list some of the partners who have been supporting this work. But above all, the Ministry of Health in Uganda, there are gaps. But I also think our ministry could still do better. Our governments can still do better. Every one of us can still do better. It is not enough what we have done. We can still do better. I thank you all. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to this platform.
Alice, thank you. I'm so glad you got back. That was kind of an overwhelming presentation, and thank you for kind of alerting and bringing attention the much wider burdens, as you called it, of fistula, and kind of the inclusion there around issues of gender-based violence, both before, during, and after the experience of fistula, the way that the need for psychosocial care, and just the necessary holistic approach to responding to this issue that incorporates a whole host of human rights. So thank you very much, Alice, for your time. And I think we'll move on to our next speaker now, and our final speaker, who is Father Edward Flynn, who is a key driver behind this webinar today. Father Edward is a member of the Irish Spiritan community in Dublin. He is one of the first international team of Spiritan missionaries to have worked in Pakistan. He also has worked in the Philippines. At one stage, he also headed up the faith-based NGO Vivat International in Geneva, in Switzerland. And currently, Father Edward is a staunch advocate for the human rights of women. And in particular, he works with individuals in Africa and South Asia in raising awareness for the prevention of obstetric fistula through his advocacy work at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. He links in with the representatives of other organizations to ensure that the prevention of obstetric fistula becomes a mainstream priority in policies and programs that aim to promote human rights and dignity of women and girls. Father Edward, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being present for this webinar. First, I wish to thank Tony, Helena, and the AMRI Justice team for organizing and facilitating this webinar. I also want to recognize the difficult lives of the many women who live with obstetric fistula, waiting for repair, recovery, and rehabilitation. And it is the knowledge of these difficult lives that has motivated me to be an advocate for their human rights. One of the great challenges in working on this issue is the wall of silence that surrounds the topic. Hopefully, this discussion today will help lift the lid on the hidden nature of obstetric fistula. It is hidden because we don't talk about it, and it is an issue that is prevalent in at least 56 countries. I also want to acknowledge my own social location in relation to this issue. I am a man, and the issue we are speaking about concerns a condition that is about women and women's rights. But it is not a hidden issue for these girls and women who live with this devastating injury 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And some of these women live for many years with the stigma surrounding their condition and without any relief. As has been said already, this condition is entirely preventable. And while obstetric fistula as a condition requires a medical intervention, it is first and foremost a women's rights issue, not just medical. Slide 2. Why a human rights-based approach? For part of the following, I am indebted to the Edmund Rice International Group. Many of you will be familiar with the story of babies in the river. Briefly, it goes like this. You see a child in the river in danger of drowning. You rescue the child and place it in a safe place. As you do so, you hear 2 more children crying out for help, also in danger of drowning. You rescue them, but more and more children appear as quickly as you rescue them from the river. In the midst of this rescue effort, the thought occurs to you, Is there another way to respond to this situation? As the rescue effort is continued by others, you move upstream to find out why the children are ending up in the river. And maybe there is something I can do to prevent it happening in the first place. The key here is that you ask the question, why is this happening? The story highlights two approaches to issues of development and poverty. One is a response to an immediate need. The other is addressing underlying causes. One is a cure, the other is moving towards prevention. Issues such as poverty, human trafficking, lack of access to education or medical care, we cannot solve on our own. We can help individuals, but like the children in the river, just as soon as we help someone, we know there are more waiting in line. We cannot address the underlying causes by ourselves. These are systemic problems that require action by governments. We can, however, speak to those who have the power to make the change, or better still, empower those affected to speak up for themselves. Speaking to those who have the power and responsibility to bring about change is what we mean by advocacies. Many issues related to development, human rights, or justice that we try to resolve are rooted in poverty. This is also true for Fistula, as has been pointed out by many already. Slide 3. So what is a human rights-based approach? The human rights-based approach is founded on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where the dignity of every person is upheld and inequality and discrimination are outlawed. 30 brief statements of this document on your screen outline the core elements of human rights. All states that joined the UN have ratified this document and are obliged to implement its provisions. Human rights are universal. They apply to everyone, irrespective of color, creed, or class. People who live away from the main road, as well as those in urban centers. Some of the human rights standards that underpin our work in relation to Fistula and underpin a human rights-based approach are dignity of the person, equality, non-discrimination, participation. And all human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent, and inalienable. Relating to Fistula, we look at the economic, social, and psychological impacts this condition has on the women affected and how these impinge on the full realization of their rights. Then we try to address these violations through our advocacy work. Implementation of the standards mentioned is a key to bringing about change in countries. Slide 4. This is just a word cloud with prevention at the center. All of the other words are connected to the work of prevention. Many are determinants of obstetric fistula, and as such, they indicate a variety of ways in which the human rights of women are not fulfilled. For instance, when people are living in poverty, their right to a decent standard of living is denied them. It is violated. The same for those who are unable to attend school. Their right to education is violated. When women who live in rural areas are unable to attend antenatal clinics during pregnancy, their right to a reasonable standard of health is denied them, and so on. These are the rights we are trying to uphold through our advocacy work. Slide 5. Within the UN system, the Population Fund is where the issue is located. And within this unit, there is a maternal health and newborn health department that writes an annual report with a special section on obstetric fistula. In 2006, the Secretary General began presenting a biennial report on the topic, indicating developments in the area and making proposals to governments. In addition to this report, there is a resolution that goes along with it and which leads to further research and recommendations. In 2017, we presented a report entitled Fulfilling the Rights of Women with Obstetric Fistula to the Special Rapporteur on the right of everyone to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. In 2018, we began making statements on this topic at the Human Rights Council in Geneva and continue to do so at each general session. Before 2018, there was little mention of the issue in the Council. While we continue to make regular statements on different aspects of the issue at the Human Rights Council, we also engage with the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and we make submissions to special representatives on thematic issues such as violence against women and discrimination. We also engage with and send reports to a few different committees, such as the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the Committee on the Rights of the Child. At the moment, we are preparing a short report on Madagascar for the review of that country at the Committee on the Rights of the Child in January. Another committee we wish to engage with in time is the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We do so because fistula is a disability. Slide 6. This next slide shows in diagram form the way we see ourselves connected to various offices within the UN and to a number of organizations with an interest in the issue. We don't need to dwell on it, as this slide will be part of the recording which you will receive. Finally, slide 7. I wish to make a couple of proposals to those of you attending today's webinar. Those of you who have contacts, associates, colleagues, or co-workers in countries where fistula is prevalent, I request that you engage in an awareness-raising process with them about the human rights dimension of this issue. And secondly, that you encourage your members in those countries to provide us in Geneva with relevant information for the advocacy work in Geneva. Our contact details are listed. Finally, there are a couple of quotes from Fratelli Tutti for those who are interested. Thank you.
Thanks, Father Edward. That was brilliant, and kind of begins to answer the question that that Alice posed just before you. You know, who is accountable for the experiences of obstetric fistula? And I'd like to also thank you for kind of asking at the very beginning the question, why? Why is this still happening when it doesn't need to happen? Who is accountable? And that you've demonstrated that the response also requires a holistic approach, not just in response to supporting the women directly, but also in at an international level, that it needs to be raised awareness of the issue and a recognition that is a human rights issue necessarily. So thank you.